Hello, God. It's good to see you all. It's great. Welcome. God, I love it that we're in each other's living rooms and bedrooms and dining rooms, and some of us are in other countries and other places. If your video's not on and you can put it on, we recommend that. Alicia mentioned that. You will get more out of the night that way. It's partially for us, but it's mostly for you. Tonight is Beyond Your Attachment Style. Makes me think, having videos on is like a good way to be connected. Now, some of you have emailed us, you're taking care of your kids and your kid is sick and like that. We understand. In that case, have your video off. It's fine. If your video is off because you're just kind of like a little not, avoidant is an attachment style, right? I have had that attachment style. We're going to talk to you about how you deal with an attachment style that's not the most healthy attachment style. How do you deal with that? How do you work with that? How do you have it be an asset instead of an obstacle? Okay. At the very least, it's funny. Is my attachment style funny?
Hilarious.
Right. She's like, it's terrible. Your attachment style is terrible.
Hilarious.
Right? All right.
I think the whole development of our relationship, we've been together for 20 years, I think is a study in how many different attachment styles can manifest in the same relationship.
And that's something we're going to cover tonight, how a lot of different we all have a bunch of them, but we gravitate towards one. So we're going to talk about the whole bunch that we have and what's your type. And also, when you get into a relationship, what's the style of that relationship, right? What's the attachment style of the relationship? What's that configuration? So we're going to add a little bit to the normal attachment style theory. Alicia and I both have degrees in psychology. We're credible to do that,
yeah.
to add to the attachment style theory. She's got a master's. I've been teaching for 30 years only in relationship and intimacy, lived in a Zen monastery, was director of a yoga ashram, taught for the world's largest transformational organization. So this is all we do, basically all we've ever done, and we love it. And if it's okay to say, we're in California, so it's okay to say we love you. Now, let's talk a little bit about our sort of development of relationship. We started flirting. I think you came to a group.
I did. I came. So my friend wanted me to meet Erwan, my friend in my master's program. She said, "You got to meet this guy, Erwan. You're going to love him. I think you're going to want to date him. He's into spirituality and sex and psychology, and he's so cool. I just met him." I'm like, "All right, take me to meet this guy." So I go over to Erwan's apartment, and he's teaching a communication game group with a big group of people in his house. And so I remember walking in and feeling like I walked into another world as I crossed the threshold into his apartment. And I spotted Erwan, and I'm like, ooh, and he's really cute. So that's where our whole relationship began. And there was some pretty healthy flirting in there, I think.
There was flirting, and it was healthy. So the first thing is that Alicia came to a social environment. I was in a social environment, and we were flirting. So that's a manifestation. I would call that secure in terms of attachment styles, being out instead of kind of hiding away. And then even flirting, even kind of putting it out there. Now, you were in a relationship, so I don't think we even talked. I think
we didn't talk. We were very across the room from each other and eyeing each other. And I was definitely sending you some signals. And somehow it came out in the communication games I was in a relationship. So you were respectful of that. So very, very secure behavior on so far.
So, for those of you who are single, we'll give you a dating tip right off the bat, which is get out there, socialize in person. We teach people how to do it on apps. Apps are okay. In person is way better. There is no substitute for that. If you have an avoidant attachment style, that might be kind of challenging. But the biggest difficulty people make people have in terms of dating is not getting out there enough. You want to socialize. We've been together for 20 years. We still go out religiously and socialize 3 times per week. Okay?
So in our story, here's where things start to get a little squirrely, right? So a few months go by, my declining other relationship is going downhill pretty fast, and then we broke up. And then Erwan and I randomly run into each other at this weekend-long retreat that we both ended up kind of randomly being at. So there he was. I walked in for breakfast on the first morning, and he was sitting there eating his bowl of cereal. I'm like, oh, God, there's Erwan. Yeah. And so I was flirting with him the entire weekend, right? Like just making eyes at him. So Erwan, totally appropriately at the end, comes up to me and makes an offer. What was your offer?
I think I said something like, I've been really enjoying, I don't think I said flirting with you. I've been really enjoying your company. Why don't we go out and get some coffee? Alicia looked at me like I was absolutely crazy. So there, I was secure there. She was not. She's the one with the secure attachment style, by the way. I'm the one with the less healthy attachment style. We'll get into that. How do you handle a relationship where one person's less healthy and one person's more? We're going to talk about that. That's really important. Most relationships are like that. But in that instant, I made the offer. I was being vulnerable. She looked at me like I was completely crazy. She was being anxious. She was being avoidant. And what did you say?
Well, I looked at him like he was crazy, and I said, I don't know, maybe. So I blew him off. My anxiety and avoidant tendencies came out. He handled it beautifully, said, great, when you're ready, here's my number, bye, and he booked it, okay? So this is where our attachment style started to come out.
All right, so what's next? So then...
we had many versions of that.
Alicia called. She did call, so she was putting it out there. She was engaging. You can see a healthier attachment style has something to do with engaging, right? Versus avoiding, versus grabbing. It's actually engaging. It's actually relating. So Alicia called several times. She was relating. She was engaging. I kept asking her out.
I kept avoiding.
You did keep avoiding. Eventually, we did go out. And how did it go from there?
Yeah. So in my moment of clarity, I said, hey, I think I should come over. I think I should stop being silly. A secure, honest thing. He right there was like, all right, come over tomorrow. Very secure response. Everything started. It was good. Then what happened was I started falling in love with you.
All right, but we got to give a little background here. So Alicia's falling in love with me. That's great. It's like a great movie, like a romantic comedy, right? But great romance, right? And I'm this sex teacher, right? So I'm teaching relationships and sex. I'm running 2 community houses in Brisbane, right next to San Francisco. And there's all these people, and it's wild, and it's a scene, and Alicia and I are dating, and it's going fantastic, and she's falling in love with me, and I am, at that point, avoidant and dismissive. That's an attachment style, avoidant and dismissive, okay? I apologize for that I was that way, but it's an attachment style, right? It's kind of like, you're sort of full of yourself or something like that, right? So I had this amazing woman in my life, but I couldn't really see it. It didn't really register because it didn't fit in with my attachment style. So I just kind of, didn't really dive into the relationship.
For example, because I was really kind of trying not to fall in love with him because I could see, Erwan is this teacher and this and that and people, and I was like, okay, he's not the person to fall in love with, but you can't help your feelings, right? Totally fell in love with the dude. And there was one day we were in his room and I said, I think I'm falling in love with you. And Erwan said, oh, thank you.
Right? So that is completely an avoidant response, right? Like I didn't hug her, I didn't, anything like that. I don't remember, but I probably even like stepped backwards or something like that. Okay, so her more secure. Now there's some anxiousness in Alicia's attachment style, but it's mostly secure. That was really coming forth, and then my difficulty was really manifesting. And we'll talk about the past and my past and your past and all the rest of that and where that difficulty comes from and, really what to do about that. Now, let's kind of cut to the chase. There was a point where Alicia wanted to get in a committed relationship and, I was balking and we actually broke up for a while. We'll talk about that later. But at a certain point, I came to my senses. And I went for it and I engaged and I said, hey, yeah, let's be in a committed relationship and let's go for it. I really stepped forward. The reason I'm telling you that is because no matter what your attachment style is, and we're going to get into them, don't worry about that. We're going to get into them and all the specifics. But no matter what your attachment style is, you are a human being and you have choice. So I was propelled to not be vulnerable, to be anxious and avoidant and all the rest of that. And instead, I went forward. Why? Because I was present and I knew that she was great and she was amazing. And like the Zen came into play and the yoga and the ashram and the Zen monastery and the psychotherapy and everything. It gave me the capacity in that moment to feel more deeply and say yes instead of the default no. All right, so we wanted to give you a little, and then from after that we got married and we'll talk to you about that and, we'll fill in the story, the empty parts or the missing parts later. But just to give you kind of a sense for it, it doesn't go smoothly for most people. It doesn't need to go smoothly for you, but the difference is going for it. And the other difference is actually knowing your attachment style.
So we are going to get into that briefly, your attachment style and how to free yourself from it. Now, there are a bunch of you here tonight that are new. This class that you have found yourself at is a session of mastery of relationship. It's our core community class. It's a weekly class. I'll talk more about it later for those of you that may want to join it. Tonight, we've opened it up for guests. So welcome. I'll say a couple of things about us and the work that we do so you know. We've been working with both singles and couples for the last 25 years. We've worked with over 14,000 singles and couples, supporting you really in having amazing love lives and amazing sex lives. A bunch of you here actually were with us when we did this event on attachment styles Friday night in San Francisco. That was super fun. We had our whole core team here. It was great. Some of you might recognize yourself in the picture.
And then we had a party. So you are here for some reason. Something got you here. You might be having a challenge attracting a partner. You'd be single and noticing yourself feeling anxious or like avoiding a relationship, but you really want it. Or maybe you're in a relationship and you just want to juice it up and have even more intimacy. Or maybe you're noticing some patterns in the relationship. One or both of you is avoiding certain things, or you're feeling anxious, or you just really want to get closer. You might be here simply to be with other people. You're looking for community and people of like minds to connect with, or something else. So we're really happy that you're here. In a couple of minutes, we're going to start the evening with a guided meditation. We're going to go into the topic. Those of you that are new, you'll have an opportunity to set up a time to speak with me privately about your love life. A bunch of you are here maybe already knowing you want that. For those of you, I'm going to put our school's number in the chat. You can text now to set up that private conversation for those of you that already know that you want it. Then we're going to do some exercises, take some Q&A. It's going to be fabulous. So let's start with the most important part, your goals. Something got you here tonight. If you're in mastery of relationship, if you're a guest tonight, however it goes, there's something that got you here tonight. And the event will be magnified by how much you put at stake. It'll be multiplied by how much you put at stake. So please take out your pen and paper and write down your goal for the evening. You want to learn your attachment style. You want to get back together with X. You want to have your relationship with so-and-so go to new heights of romance and intimacy and turn on. You want to discover your attachment style so you can heal your relationship with your parents. Whatever it is. But put the real thing in, like the real juice, because the event is going to be multiplied by whatever you write down on that sheet of paper. Tonight, you're more important than we are. Tonight's about you. It's about your goals. But you don't want to play at the $2 table. You want to play at the priceless table. So put a lot at stake and have it be specific to you. What do you want to get? And you'll know you got the right thing when you can really feel it in your body, when you can really feel it in your heart. You don't have a theoretical life, you have a real life. Real relationship, a real desire to get into a relationship. If you got nothing else out of the night besides really writing down what you want, that would be worth 2 hours. Really feeling that in your chest, in your heart, in your solar plexus. All right, so you can keep writing if you're still writing that. It's fine to keep writing, but I'd like you to take a breath and really breathe that in. And we're going to do a little guided meditation, all right, to really get us present, because presence is the difference maker, being present, being aware. And we're going to start that with our bodies, because our bodies are often neglected. So I'd like you to take a breath, feel your body, feel your feet. And you want to find a nice balance between relaxation and alertness. So have your spine be as vertical as possible. And also have your body be relaxed. You can imagine your spine getting longer, the crown of your head, the highest point on your head, lifting towards the ceiling, your chest lifting. So it's a big barrel-shaped chest. If you do yoga, pigeon chest, big open chest. Notice how that feels in your heart. And really feel your lower body. Really feel your feet. Notice how that grounds you. Lets the brain relax. And take a moment and just contemplate and reflect on your romantic life today. Not analyzing it, not necessarily thinking about it, but just bringing it to mind as you feel your body and your heart. And begin to take a little trip down memory lane, going into the past, how it's been the last few years, relationship you're in, or that you were in, or not being in a relationship, however it's been for you. And let yourself really feel that. With a deep openness and acceptance. Keep your inner critic or your superego or your inner judge out of it. As you let yourself continue further into the past, and you start to begin to notice the type of romantic connections that you form, or the lack of them, if that's the case for you. And without any judgment, positive or negative, you start to notice the style of relationship that you form. Before I met Alicia, I was forming superficial relationships. For you, maybe it's secure relationships or dramatic relationships. Or codependent relationships. You just notice what you notice, but just begin to contemplate it. Begin to feel it. Maybe it's the absence of relationships. And then go even further into the past. Let yourself go all the way back to those initial romantic relationships. Usually they're as a teenager. How did those feel? Were you shy? Were you boisterous? Did you avoid relationship? Did you attract people of a particular type? And just begin to feel all that so that tonight is about you and your attachment style and how it's been for you and how it is for you. So it's not theoretical. And now I'd like you to go even further into the past, into your relationships with your family. They're not really romantic relationships unless there's been some kind of trauma or abuse, and that's really difficult when that happens. And if that's the case, you notice that. But otherwise, notice what your relationships were like with siblings, if you had them, and also your parents. And spend a moment here, because this is a very important part. This is really the origin of your attachment style. Your relationship with your family members, especially your parents. Was it secure, or were you needing more attention, or were you trying to avoid a parent who was too much, sort of enmeshed? Was it safe? Was it not safe? Were they around? Were they not around? And don't worry about the vocabulary, but just let yourself feel all that. And then just gently let your eyes open as you're present to that without any judgment, just kind of open to it. My childhood was very difficult. My parents immigrated from another country. They got divorced shortly afterwards. It was a terrible divorce, and then it got worse from there, right? Or, I have great in-laws. Alicia's parents were, at least relative to mine, were, they were great and they are great. And there were difficulties there also. But just let yourself be with how it was for you. And also know that that plays a part in how it is for you now. Let yourself feel that. If you're in mastery of relationship, you have some sense of that. So it's not so much, if you're in mastery of relationship, it's not necessarily new knowledge, but you're feeling it. That's the important part. You're noticing it. And these attachment styles that we had with our family members, they create strange behaviors, right? Like grabbing onto people and trying to own them, or running away from people that you like. Right? So they create all kinds of, really sort of odd behaviors. Like, when I was young and I started dating, if I liked a woman, I somehow compulsively felt a need to tell her, something that was wrong, that I didn't like about her. Right? Now, I've completely transcended that issue, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
I have not transcended that issue. We'll tell you how to work with that later, okay? But what I'd like you to do now is start to write down on your pad of paper, what are the strange behaviors that you've noticed yourself engaging in the past and the present? Like, yeah, it's a little strange that... you love your husband and you don't say that. Or the last person you liked, when they texted you, you didn't text back. Or they texted you and you texted them 8 times, back. So just make a note. And, this is just for you. You don't have to share it with anybody.
As you're writing, you can contemplate things we've seen in the media and movies. Like, this makes me think of Sex and the City, of course, which will always be one of my very favorites. But all they do is trip out and be anxious about their relationship lives. They exhibit very strange behaviors in different ways.
Everybody does this. It's a very advanced thing to do, to notice your strange behavior or how wacky we are as human beings. Most people can't do that. They can't tell the truth about the weird stuff they do. But that's important to know that. Now you can keep writing. I'm going to share a little bit as you write. You can keep writing. You can draw pictures. You can write shorthand. Whatever works for you. Now, that strange behavior comes from your past. So for me, my parents got divorced when I was 4. I don't have any memories of them together. They were, basically saying nasty things to each other through me. Well, of course, as a teenager, I would be, what would occur to me to do would be to be kind of avoidant and critical, right? It didn't come from nowhere, right? So that's the case for all of us. Or if if your family was the opposite of that, very enmeshed and holding on too tight, and you had to exactly follow the rules, and it had to be some way, and you had to be a good girl or a good boy all the time, and then you'll notice some of that behavior. Or even if that was the way it was, very enmeshed, and you had to follow the rules, and now you're rebelling against that. Well, it's still impacted by your past. Now, the next thing we'd like you to write is we'd like you to write a little bit about your past. What were the most eventful things that happened? A divorce, somebody being sick, a sibling dying, things being really, really wonderful, but you couldn't say when there was a problem. So I'd like you to write a little bit about your past, your childhood. And it doesn't need to be just your relationship with your parents. It can also be your parents' relationship with each other, because that's what was modeled for you. If a sibling took care of you, it could be about your relationship with that sibling. Or if you saw a sibling being abused, that had an impact on you. So I want you to write about your childhood, sort of shorthand. What were the most influential and eventful parts of your past that influenced how you relate to people now? And if you're not sure, just write it down. Especially anything that was particularly difficult. And this is just for you. We're going to do some talking exercises later. You don't have to share this stuff if you don't want to. But you do want to know it. And just breathe that in and feel that. And we're not going to play Blondie now. And this is very tender material. And the most important part of tonight is really being with that material, without judgment, without criticism, openly. If you can know that about yourself, you can know that about somebody else. And it tends to form styles of attachment. So if we look at the childhood attachment styles, we see secure, which is, really feel safe, really feel comfortable. You love your parents, they love you. That's really the case for all the attachment styles, but it's expressed, it's known. And then they put avoidant next here, but really the next one should be ambivalent. Then we go from secure to ambivalent, and that's, ambivalent is, it's not totally secure. You're not totally sure if it's safe to share that emotion. Maybe there's too much spanking, or maybe the parent's not available. They're at work too much, or maybe, it's not both parents, right? For me, for most of my childhood, it was one parent. It was my father. For a little while, I was back and forth between my mother and my father, but then my mother went back to France, and it was just my father. Right? And it creates a kind of an anxiousness and ambivalence. And here they're calling it ambivalent, but typically it's called anxious ambivalent. Okay, so we go from secure to anxious ambivalent. In fact, they have anxious up here. And this is most typified by a codependent or an overly needy attachment style. Now, if things are a little bit more difficult, then we get into an avoidant attachment style. Here they're calling it avoidant, but typically it's called anxious avoidant. And this is more like the loner. Quiet, withdrawn, sort of separating oneself. So we go from secure, which is like together, to sort of, together and not together, to here, really separating oneself. It doesn't really feel so safe. And then we go all the way to disorganized, when not only does it not feel safe, but it's kind of chaotic. It's kind of a mess. You really don't know what to expect. There's some shock. There's some trauma. And then, we really don't know what to do. Should I go away? Should I go forward? Is there anything I can do? So it leads to things like being depressed or angry. It's hard to figure out what's going on. Okay, so those are the childhood attachment styles. And, you can just kind of get a sense of where you're at on that. It's kind of like a spectrum, where you're at on that progression. Okay, and it's fine if you kind of sense a little bit of two of them. You probably have a gravitational center, but you probably are a little more centered here or there, like that. Now, let's now look at adult attachment styles, which relates a little bit more to romantic relationships. Okay, again, we have secure, confident, and you feel stable, you're able to be in a relationship. This is really marked by you can put both feet into the relationship. Now, they've then taken the anxious ambivalent, right? Here we've got ambivalent, really it's anxious ambivalent. And here they actually call it, in the adult style, for whatever reason, they call it anxious preoccupied. Okay, and this is the codependent, a little overly needy, anxious style of attachment in relationship. And you can just kind of feel, does that mark your relationship style? Are you more codependent, more needy? Like you go out with somebody who's not a good fit for you longer than you need to, or the person's not being nice to you and you still kind of hold on, or something like that. Now, if we come down here, we've got the avoidant styles. So what they've done is they've taken the avoidant childhood style and they've divided it into two. And they've not included the disorganized style. If a person has a disorganized style as a child and it continues in that direction, then their reality testing is going to be very low, and you get into some level of psychotic behavior, which just basically means it's very, very hard to function. So in the attachment styles of adults, they don't really include that. That's a much more serious issue. It's probably not the case for you. So what they do is they take the avoidant style and they divide it into two. And the avoidant style tends to become kind of a dismissive avoidant style. Isolation, ambiguity, ambivalence, emotionally distant. But it's a little bit narcissistic. It's a little bit holier than thou, kind of better than. If you find yourself kind of avoiding your partner and kind of blaming them, sort of criticizing them a lot, this is that kind of better than style of avoidance. Or if you're single and you can't find anybody good enough, or nobody's a good enough fit, or something like that, that's a kind of hint for this style. And then the other style of avoidant is fearful. You're not feeling better than them. You might even be feeling worse than them. It's hard to get into a relationship because, you don't feel good enough. Or if you're in a relationship, you're kind of avoiding your partner because you feel like you lucked out and they're somehow better or something like that. Okay? So these are the adult styles. What we'd like you to do, I'm going to leave this slide, I'll put it back up in a minute. What we want you to do now is we want you to write down which of these do you sense like, okay, that's my attachment style. And most people are going to have one. But if you really feel that you need to, you can combine them a little bit. So you might want to, for example, put anxious, avoidant, if that's kind of what fit for you. If you can locate it in one of them, that's a little bit better. So use the notes that you wrote a moment ago and pick an attachment style for you, even if you need to be a little bit creative with it. Well, we're not going to play Blondie. We're going to play something a little more
conducive,
yeah. Something that's going to help us think. Yeah. Somebody's asking a good question here. Can you be more than one? This is the attachment styles are a theory. So the answer is yes, you can be more than one. You noticed when Alicia and I shared our history, we kind of zoomed around a little bit. It's a pretty good theory, so you'll probably gravitate towards one. But the most important point is not that you fit in with the theory. The most important point is you notice, oh, I tend to avoid, or I tend to be anxious. Or, I'm pretty comfortable with people, but I tend to attract people who avoid or are anxious. I love it. We got a great comment here about somebody's attachment style being delightfully complex. It's good to have a sense of humor about this because it's not so much about transcending your attachment style as it is really knowing it and being present. We'll talk about that shortly. All right. Now, this is where we're going to be a little bit innovative. And this comes from, I've been teaching this for 30 years. Alicia's been teaching this for 20. We have a combined 50 years of working with individuals and couples. We worked with over 14,000 people in depth. And one of the things that we found is that there's not only Alicia's attachment style and my attachment style, but there's an attachment style for the relationship. Okay, it's like we each have our relationship blueprints, but then there's a relationship blueprint of the relationship. And there are three basic categories of how that tends to look. And we're going to put them up on the screen. You might want to note these. So this is what we call the relationship style. Okay, the most common combinations. Anxious and avoidant.
So one is anxious, one is avoidant.
The avoidant one could be the dismissive or the fearful style of avoidant. And that's kind of sort of where Alicia and I were to begin with. She's maybe a little bit more on a secure side, but, we were different.
And they feed each other too. The more avoidant one person is, the more anxious the other person will become. And then the person wants to avoid more.
It's like a perfect puzzle. You know, I like how Alicia said that they feed each other. The other one is secure and anxious. And then the third is secure and avoidant. Again, it could be dismissive or fearful. Now, the big takeaway from that is that very rarely do you end up with people of the same type. Very rarely do you end up with two avoidants getting together, or because they would just avoid, right? Like nobody,
they would not get together.
You kind of need somebody going towards the other one. Or rarely do you have two anxious folks getting together. And also rarely do you have two secure, simply because secure is so rare. I kind of feel like I lucked out, right? So there's this relationship style. And we want to share a little bit about how you can handle it from the healthier, if you will, maybe the secure, or the less healthy position in the relationship.
So, for example, there was a period in our relationship where I had been like, let's get into a committed relationship. Let's be together. Let's go for it. And then Erwan was, you know, all at once saying things like, I'm scared. I don't know. I mean, he was clearly working through some issues and at the same time wasn't doing it. Going for it. And I remember this one morning, I remember it so vividly. We were in the throes of this like angsty, are we going to do this? Are we not going to do this? And we were together at his house and we had just had like amazing sex and it was all like angsty and dramatic and good. And then I went to go take a shower. And then I got dressed and I came back into Erwan's room and he's like, you know, I just don't think I'm that kind of person. Like, I'm not the committing kind. And then, like, something happened for me. I was like, oh, I think he's telling the truth this time. I mean, it was not like he was lying before, but okay, I think he's clear. So I was like, okay, thanks for being so clear. I'm leaving now. And then I got all my stuff and I walked out the front door and I went across the street and I got into my car and I was like, you know, like it's over, but it's over and I know that it's over. And, getting ready to drive away. And then I look out my window and Erwan's running from his house in his robe. And he's like, wait, I don't know what I'm doing. Roll down the window. And this was an example of like, I don't know what you were right there. Anxious, crazy, I don't know, but he was in his...
I was having a revelation.
And I was like, you know, kind of clear. And like, okay, this dude doesn't know, I should go. And it was really tempting right there to kind of loop into the drama and be like, no, goodbye forever, and drive off and never talk to him again. I held my ground. I knew I had to stick to leaving because of what had just happened. I was like, I gotta go. I love you. You know, we'll talk soon. I stayed open. I didn't compromise myself, but I didn't run away either.
See, that's the brilliant thing that Alicia did there. She didn't compromise herself, and so she left, but she also didn't leave like, you know, I'm going to curse if that's all right. I'm from New York. I grew up in, you know, she didn't leave like, fuck you, I'm leaving. She left like, wow, you know, I really want to be in a relationship with you, but you're not open to that, so I'm leaving. She didn't compromise herself, but she stayed open. And then fortunately, for whatever reason, the meditation had worked and the psychotherapy and all this stuff that we're studying tonight, right? This work. And I knew, okay, this is just my difficulty. And the presence and the awareness allowed me to handle it from my end. And I could compensate, if you will, for my own challenge and say, no, you know, let's, in my dramatic fashion, in my robe running down the street, you know, I could take an action that was outside of my relationship blueprint. So if you're on the more secure side of the relationship, when the relationship you're in or the relationships you tend to get in, you want to know that, right? And you want to not compromise yourself, and you want to understand the other person's difficulty and have space and room for that. If you're on the other side of the equation, right? Like, you're the anxious one, or and everybody's got some of both. I know it's not as black and white as we're saying, but we're kind of giving you the gist of it. But if we could say it this way, if you find yourself in a moment being the anxious one or the avoidant one or something like that, you can adjust for that, right? You can compensate for that, if you will. For example, if you've done something hurtful to the other person, you can make an amend. If you're avoiding, you can set up a vacation, where there's not going to be any distractions and you're in a gorgeous room in Thailand. In fact, when we got committed, I offered Alicia, hey, let's go to Thailand. Do you understand? You can make adjustments because you're a human being. If there's enough presence, you can really compensate for that. Now, a secret skill. This is not the focus of tonight. We'll get into this focus soon in Mastery of Relationship. If you're, you kind of want to bring something extra because you have some difficulties in the intimacy or something like that, being really good in bed works wonders. Okay, like your partner will forgive you many things. It's one of our specialties. Like, we do extended orgasm practice. I stroke Alicia into a state of extended orgasm most every morning, and she forgives me enormous things. I have like a 12-hour state of grace. It's not the focus tonight, but I'm just kind of adding that in. It really does work. It's not to be neglected.
I was going to say that's your ace in the hole. Throw that in the hole, baby. Yeah, it's good. It's good. Okay, so you might be wondering now, those of you that are in Mastery of Relationship, you're in the midst of addressing your relationship issues and your goals. And those of you that are new, you might be wondering, like, how do I... What are the steps? Like, how do I even begin to deal with these issues? How do I develop skills? So our method, we're going to go through it now because we want you to see step by step how we address the different challenges and goals that you have in your relationship life.
And you should write these down because this is what to do about all that. It's like a formula, but it's a formula that really works.
So we start with the most important part, consciousness of your relationship patterns. This is the focus tonight of this class, is dealing with your relationship patterns. Do you tend to be anxious? Do you tend to be needy? Do you tend to not be trusting?
Are you the savior type or the codependent type? Are you avoiding? Is it like you're always trying to get close to your partner, but you can't quite? Or, you're an avoidant type that you're kind of distracted?
So we all have our own version. So the first part of our method is bringing awareness to that. Second part of our method is really touching in and making contact with yourself, your deepest self. There are many names for this. Your spirit, your being, your authentic self, your soul, whatever word speaks to you.
Your consciousness, true nature, Atman, all kinds of things that represent who are you behind all these patterns. We've all got these patterns. That's our focus tonight. But what is behind all that?
The third part of our method is then chemistry. Like, once you're clear in the head, clear in your being, how do you deliberately create chemistry with another person? Either a potential partner, people you're dating, your relationship partner. Most people think that chemistry just kind of rains down on us and then it mysteriously goes away and we don't really know what to do. So it's like, how do you get that spice and that chemistry between two people?
So does your attachment style... Chemistry is one of the biggest things that gets hit by our attachment style. So, if your attachment style is avoidant and you're not around your partner, it's kind of hard to be turned on. Or if your attachment style is needy and there's a lot of fear, it's kind of hard to be relaxed and comfortable and kind of get your groove on.
The fourth part of the method we call choreography. which is how to skillfully move through the different stages of relationship. And this is a place where our attachment styles can really dictate what's going on. You know, if you're kind of avoidant, it's hard to get past the dating stage. It's hard to get into a more vulnerable, deep relationship. If you're more anxious, maybe you tend to rush in. You know, I did some of that with Erwan, just rush in and grab and lock them down so you know you've got them, right?
Or if you're secure, sometimes, you know, it's hard to understand that, oh, somebody else might not be secure and they might have some difficulties, and you need to take that into account and know how to work with them and help them go through these different stages of finding their authentic self and creating chemistry so that they can move through the stages of relationship.
And finally, the fifth part of the method is cultivating your sexuality, your sexual potential, your connection to that sexual, sensual aspect of yourself. And when we're really caught up in our patterns and in an attachment style, kind of like as a default, the sexual energy in our body doesn't get to flow as much as it really could. So we really address sex, skill, anatomy, how to have extended pleasure in the body. We really address that because you don't want to leave that part out.
So what you notice is it's a very multifaceted approach. And you don't have to not have an attachment style. Everybody's got an attachment style, and everybody's got a little bit of all of them, even disorganized. It's okay to embrace that. The most important thing is to know it, to feel it, and then to move through those different stages. So you know your attachment style, you contact your deeper self, you're not limited by your attachment style, you can create chemistry, you can flirt. Even though I had this avoidant attachment style, I could flirt because I knew I had that, so I could compensate for it. Then moving through the stages of relationship, when it was time to commit, I could commit. We'll talk later about when we got married. We got this beautiful little boy, and like, you know, even with all those difficulties from the past, I could still move things forward. And then you can really have the romance and the sex and the, you know, the juice that is the possibility of romantic relationship.
Well, that's the beautiful thing. I mean, that is one of the big things we want you to take, is that it's okay to have an attachment style. I mean, I still remember the first night that I met Erwan, and like the first time I saw him out of the corner of my eye, there was like, I like looked and there was this presence beaming at me from across the room. He has all his stuff. He's super open and gracious about talking about the patterns, but because of the practice and the practices and the growth, presence was shining through, and I was really attracted to that.
So take a moment, feel your body, feel your presence. You are perfect. You are absolutely perfect as you are. Really let yourself receive that. That's how we feel about you.